Do you still read the newspaper? I do occasionally. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do every day. I mean, times have changed. Things change. Most people, including myself, get their news and information from an online source. And I don't mean that in a negative way. But it is interesting. I do like the idea of the newspaper. And of course, maybe my idea of it's not what it actually was. That's true for most things in life. You'll end up being disappointed when you find out the truth. But I guess we all have to make our own truths. And that's the heart of Ron Howard's 1994 film, The Paper, which is the film I'm going to be talking about today in my series of underrated classics, which are films that I think are are great films that deserve recognition more so than what they get. Even if they got good reviews and did well financially, I don't think they quite are as popular as they deserve. And The Paper is an easy one to include on this list. I've always loved this movie, even when I was a kid. Written by Stephen Koepp, who was an editor at Time Magazine, and then co-written by his brother David Koepp, who I mentioned on my last video talking about Stir of Echoes. This is one of Ron Howard's best comedies. He actually kind of made a name for himself as a comedy director before he really broke out with Apollo 13, and he did a series of films with Michael Keaton. This is my favorite out of those movies. It might be material meeting filmmaker, but if Howard's trying on any level to create the energy and the zaniness and just the frantic dialogue, the quickness of it, the crackerjack pace of an old Hollywood film, let's say like a Bringing Up Baby, or actually a more accurate comparison would be His Girl Friday by Howard Hawks, if we're going with a Hawks film. If that's what he's trying to get at here, he succeeds more so than most filmmakers of his era at creating, to me, a classic screwball comedy with a lot of heart, a lot of weird turns, but is all held together by great performances. And just the premise of the film works so well. If you haven't seen The Paper, it follows 24 hours of a bunch of people who work at a newspaper, the editors, the writers, all sorts. It goes from every department that could possibly be there. Now, I had a lot of friends who were journalists in college and then went on to go work for some papers, which didn't last very long because unfortunately it's a dying industry. But I still have a couple friends who work, and they like this movie quite a bit. They said it's not really accurate if you're not working at like a high level situation. You know, if you're not in the city, like this movie portrays, because they're in a they're in New York, so obviously there's going to be a lot going on. So there's a couple murders that day, and it's all about a police cover up. So it's them trying to get their sources and find out if it's correct that this police cover up happened, and then get the story out before the next day. So it's all about having a deadline. So Michael Keaton in the lead role, he has a pregnant wife. He's getting offered a new job, and he's stressed out as hell because he's just trying to get this story. And you got a terrific turn from Randy Quaid in this, who might actually steal the movie. Glenn Close and Robert Duvall, who are always good, and tons of great character actors and small little roles here and there. The main reason I love this movie, though, to get through all that information of what it's about, that it's just this film that follows a newspaper room for 24 hours and then kind of throws in the problems that are going on with their lives around it, the struggles they have with their lives, and the struggles they have with each other, personal struggles. It's mainly just energy. I love the energy and feel of this movie. Even if all the lines of dialogue aren't classics, even if you've seen something like this before, which I have, it's the feeling of this movie that I really enjoy. It puts me in a good mood. It makes me very happy when I'm watching it, and it always engages me as a story each time I watch it because you don't know exactly where it's going. You may have an idea where it's going, but it does find clever ways to surprise you and becomes more cinematic as it goes along too. At first, you think it's just going to be this film with them kind of arguing a lot in rooms about what they need to do, but as it goes on, it really gives you a geography and more world building of the city and this place and these people in this place, which was one of the aspects that's great. It's got a great feel of place. Like these people have lived here for a long time. They belong here. Michael Keaton is terrific in the lead role. The dialogue completely suits him. Being a fast talking guy like this in this type of situation, makes so much sense for him. It might be the best casting of his career outside of like Birdman and Clean and Sober. It's just the dead on role for Keaton. What the paper ultimately says, though, is that despite the work itself being sort of worth it and maybe not worth it, depending on how much you're getting paid and what you're doing, it's about the bond that the people who work together build when they know they have something good and what they can accomplish with journalism and by telling people the truth. They're truth seekers in this movie. Sure, a lot of the characters are greedy and out for themselves, and there's a lot of infighting and backstabbing, but it never takes away the fact that they're all seeking the story. That's what they all want. They all want something that they can get out there that really connects with people. And you feel their connection with the readers. You feel like they actually want to have something to say. They want to have something to report on. They just don't want to release some boring story that you've seen 1,000 times. They want to give you that hook that no one else has. They don't want to just be another generic paper where you read the same story that everyone writes. I like that about this movie. I think Ron Howard was so well suited for the material because he has such a light touch as a director that if this film went too far into the dramatic, it would kind of lose its charm. And if it went too far into the comedy, it would almost feel like a parody. But he finds a right balance in the middle of it feeling like true to life, but also being a movie, which has flourishes and things about it that aren't necessarily realistic, but they don't have to be. There's not too much to go into, so this isn't going to be a long video. I'm not going to break down all the little things like that and talk about the cinematography or the editing or all that stuff because it's not even really worth going into. When you see the movie, you get it. But I will say it is very well edited by Daniel Hanley and Mike Hill. It is very, very well edited, and the music by Randy Newman is absolutely terrific. And anything Randy Newman works on, I'm pretty much a fan of. I'm just a sucker for him. But the reason I'd recommend this movie and why I think it's underrated is just that for what it is, you have to accept movies for what they are sometimes, not what you want them to be. This is a movie that wants to be a very middle of the road kind of minor classic. It doesn't want to be a masterpiece, but it doesn't want to be forgettable. It doesn't want to be fluff. And I always appreciated films like that because I think they're tough to pull off. Even if you have the craftsmanship of Ron Howard and you have the background experience and what you're writing about like the Koepp brothers did. It's really hard to find a balance with a film that's a perfect movie. I like to call them the perfect cable movie. A film that's on television, like The Paper, which is how I first saw it and have seen it several times, and you click on it, and it's always fun to watch on TV, no matter what. Even if you're catching it halfway into the movie, you can follow it real easily. Now, this film, it did well. It made $48 million on a $6 million budget. It has 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. It received an Oscar nomination for Song. And I still don't think it's as well respected as it should be. It's like really outside of a generation of people in the '90s who saw it in the theater or probably on video. It's kind of forgotten about. I don't think the millennials are that much into this film at all. Everyone I've ever told about it's never heard of it. You go look up ratings for this movie or retrospectives or anything like that. None of them have many hits. It doesn't have many votes on IMDb. So to me, it just seems like a film a lot of people maybe have heard of or know about, but they haven't actually seen. And there lies it being underrated. Once you see this movie, man, I think for the most part, I'm not going to say that, I don't say this lightly, but I think it's a movie anyone could enjoy. I think if you're young, you can enjoy this movie just because it moves fast and it's got very likable characters. It's got very quick dialogue. It's got a very well told story, a well structured story. In particular, the third act, I think, is just wonderful. The payoff of everything. The last, 20 minutes really makes everything before that feel earned. But you're so caught up in what's happening and how quick the movie's moving and how it really does pull off that 24-hour thing that sometimes you forget that you're watching a 2-hour film. For a long time I thought this movie was like 90 minutes or something like that. I'm shocked that it's like 110 minutes. It could be too long or too short, but they actually found, I think, the perfect length for this movie. And that's what a lot of this movie is. It's just nice little, it doesn't have a lot of rough edges. It's just a nice little tight package. It's like a newspaper itself in a way. It's efficient. It met its deadline, and it didn't go over. It didn't overreach and change your life, but it also gave you enough information about the business itself and what you watch the movie for. It's a movie called The Damn Paper, so you want to hear about the paper business. You want to you want to know what goes on. It gives you just enough to satisfy you. And it's just a good feeling when you watch it. It's got some dark stuff in it, but it only really hints at those things. It never really explores it fully, which you could say is a criticism, but once again, I think you have to accept the movie for what it is. As a commercial Hollywood film of the 1990s, I think The Paper is actually one of the finest. This isn't one of the greatest films of all time, but a classic doesn't have to be one of the greatest films of all time. A classic is just a movie that you can watch over and over for years and it still holds up. I mean, I've been watching this movie for, I guess, 20 years almost, and it still holds up. So to me, that's a classic. That's a film that stands the test of time. And yeah, it's not going to be in my top 10, and it's not going to be maybe even in my top 30, but it might be in my top, 150 to 200. This film takes the approach of, hey man, it's just another day in your life. It's a job. It's a job. And if you want to see the film that explores it in a satirical way or in a philosophical way that's beautiful, go watch something like Network about the TV business. Go see something like that. If you really want to, or watch Sweet Smell of Success, if you want to see something about like the world of gossip. But the paper isn't about any of that. It's about people who do their job and do their job well, and it shows you how that job is done. It's a very to the point kind of film. It's efficient in that way. And the process. I'm a big fan of movies about the process. If you watch my channel, you'll know that I love talk radio. I love movies that are about Hollywood, like The Player, or Ed Wood even. I like movies that show you how people do things. Almost for anything really, any movie that's about how someone does their job, their day-to-day life, especially with a topic that I'm not too familiar with. I'm more familiar with this topic than other things, but it's a go-to story thing that always works for me. And the paper's no different. I'm just as happy watching a movie about the behind the scenes of the newspaper business as I am about the music industry or the television industry or got the behind the scenes of a guy who's a puppeteer, maybe even, anything like that. Even being John Malkovich, that was interesting seeing him be the puppeteer. I could have watched a whole movie about Cusack doing that. That's a different thing, though. The paper's focused. It is one of those, here's a comedy that all takes place in the city with these quirky characters, and they're at a bar and they're arguing, and then he's got to meet his wife for this thing. She's having a baby. There's a lot of cliches here. It's a Hollywood movie. It's what Ron Howard did for years. He makes, it's light Spielberg, right? But sometimes you need some light Spielberg, man. Sometimes you need some 2% milk instead of whole milk. That's my way of seeing it. Anyway, what do I have finally to say about the paper? Because I feel like I'm just going to repeat myself, and there isn't too much to go into. I'm sorry if this video lacks depth, but I just don't think it's a very deep movie. So it's hard to talk about it in that way. Basically, the only way to talk about it would be just say, hey, watch it, and then bring up specific jokes and bits from the movie. Which there's plenty of great ones that I would recommend for you to view or just watch the movie, quite frankly. The Paper is one of Ron Howard's better pitched films, and the fact that it has Michael Keaton in it and such a great performance really puts it over the top. And yeah, just the way it's directed and flows and the edits of everything and how they show everything, and I don't know, it all just feels right. It feels like they had a lot of fun making the movie. It feels like they knew what the movie was just even from the screenplay to the final product. It's all there. I think they made the movie they wanted to make, which I also like. And at the end of the day, a movie is either good or bad to you based on how you felt after you were done watching. Even if you could think a movie's good and you don't really enjoy it. But what I find about The Paper that's amazing is that it's entertaining like a great movie, like a truly great film. But at the end of the day, it's probably just a good movie, really. And that's all it is. But sometimes a good movie, when you're watching it, when you're in the moment, when you forget about everything else and you're just enjoying it for what it is, can really feel like a great movie. And that's the magic of cinema and the magic of art. That something can be greater than what it is. Or maybe even feel lesser to us than what it is. depending on what movie you see or what you're listening to or what you're absorbing. But the lesson the paper teaches us through it all is that the industry, the media, everything about it is kind of wacky. There's a lot of zaniness to it. There's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of stuff that we probably don't like ethically that they did and do, and there's probably a lot of things we don't agree with, and it's hard to view things in an objective way from both ends. But the paper tells you you don't have to trust these people. You don't even have to like these people. And you certainly don't have to respect them. But it does say they have a place. And they have a place in our society, in our world. For better or worse, their place is there. And it does mean something sometimes. That efficient factory like quality to this movie, that machine like aspect to it, I just find very appealing. So The Paper from 1994, underrated classic, perfect cable movie, perfect film to watch on television. And yeah, Randy Quaid kills in it too. One of the better Randy Quaid performances. I know he's not like loved as he used to be, but yeah, definitely worth watching if you're a fan of him like I am. And he sadly had a great run in the 70s and then became a comedic actor in the 80s, and his work was great, but it's nice to see him kind of return to a character actor role in this movie. And it really pays off, especially near the end. So that's it for this video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.